Hey guys, welcome back to the Joy of Wrenching. I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic, and today in the shop we've got this 2019 Dodge Ram 1500. It's got the big 3.6 liter V6 or Pentastar engine in it. And the problem that the owner of this truck is experiencing is they got an error code, a check engine light, P0197 for oil temperature sensor. Now, who even knew that there was an oil temperature sensor on these Pentastar engines? Well, there is. And we're going to go ahead and see what's going on with this thing and why it's throwing a code for that. So come along and let's get into it. Well, so sure enough, we have a P0197 engine oil temperature sensor circuit low. Okay. And like I said, we got a check engine light on this thing. It's only got 83,000 miles. I'm using my Top Don Phoenix Light 3. Pretty handy little machine here. Does all kinds of great things if you're interested. Got topology, and we've got a few little error codes, but the only one we're really concerned about is this PCM code. So let's go in here and let's see what kind of reading we're getting off of this thing. Let's see. Come on. All right, so let's go into the data stream and let's look at a couple of data points. Oh, there's 229 of them. We only need a couple. Let's look at engine coolant temperature versus engine oil temperature. Those ought to be pretty close to one another. And so let's see. All right, let's graph those. Okay, so engine coolant temperature right now is 131 degrees. Engine oil temperature is not quite there. So the coolant temperature is, I just turned the car on. It's really cold out today. It's 40 degrees outside or so. So the engine coolant temperature is speeding up, trying to heat up the heating and air conditioning system. The engine oil temperature is going to take a little while longer to catch up, but it's increasing, it's working. All right. Now, so you might be wondering, oh, who gives a rat's butt if I've got a P0197, 096, 098, whatever engine oil temperature problem? I know that the car's not overheating because the coolant temperature is not too high. So why do I care about that? Well, you might not, but the computer inside of the vehicle does. And so what's happening in this case is the truck thinks that there's a problem. It says, oh my, the oil temperature is not reading correctly. There must be a problem, and it throws it into limp mode. So that's why we have to fix this thing, and we can't just leave the check engine light on and ignore it. So let's go see what's wrong with this thing, and let's see if we can fix it. So I've got the truck running right now. We're warming up. Like I said, it's pretty chilly out here today. And so the temperature's starting to creep up. We got engine coolant temperature 154 degrees. Now it's probably reading off of the engine coolant temperature sensor, not the radiator. So it's getting warm quickly as it tries to heat up the water so that the heater inside will start working. And then we've got our engine oil temperature, which is what was having the problem. And it's starting to increase as well. Right now it shows it at 89 degrees or so. Okay, so the engine oil temperature sensor has got a problem. Where does that live? That lives underneath the intake and is part of our oil cooler assembly. Now, you guys that have a Pentastar, remember that oil cooler assembly is a real problem on these engines, mainly due to oil leaks and coolant leaks from the gaskets underneath those over time. Sometimes they crack, other things like that. Well, on the back side of that oil cooler, you've got an oil pressure sensor and an oil temperature sensor. And unfortunately, we cannot see them. They're, way up underneath the intake there. But what I can do, since I know that my error code was for circuit problems, there's probably an issue with the wiring. So what I'm going to try and do, and I'm going to show you guys as I do it, I'm going to try and get back here with my hand and kind of reach behind, do a little reach around there and see if I can't fiddle with the wires and see if that makes any kind of weird things happen on our readings. So let me get something so I can get back. So now I'm ready to get in there. I'm going to mess around with those wires while we look at the sensor readings itself. And the way I'm going to get back there is with this cool little thing that I got. It's a step that goes on the tire and allows you to get up and into the engine bay easier. Yeah, shameless plug, and I'll put a link into the description for the thing, but it's a handy little thing. All right, so now I've got my step. I can get back here and reach back behind the intake there, try to look at the readings of the sensors while I'm back here messing around with the wiring, see if there's any kind of a loose connection or maybe a rubbed through wire or anything like that. And as I was doing this, unfortunately I didn't catch it here on video, but as I was doing this last night, the oil temperature dropped to a -40. Okay, as I was fiddling around with the wiring, just maneuvering it by hand back here behind the intake, it went to a -40, showing that, yeah, there's some sort of a connection issue, either the wiring, the connector, something that is causing this problem. Obviously, the sensor itself is reading. The sensor is reading correctly, but when I messed around with the wiring back there, I got it to go to -40, had a bad connection. So as I'm looking here, you notice all of this? These are rodent footprints, okay? All over this engine. And so I'm thinking that there's a possibility, it's plausible, that maybe a mouse got back in here and, you know, maybe has chewed on a few wires or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this thing off, let it cool down. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to remove the intake to get back to the bottom underneath there and see the oil cooler and the oil pressure and temperature sensors. But we'll go back there and we'll see if we can't find the problem. All right, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is remove our air intake. And so we'll just go ahead and pinch and squeeze and undo our air intake temperature sensor. And we've got 8mm worm clamps, one attaching here, our throttle body, to the air snorkel. Go ahead and loosen that up good. All right, and we'll go ahead, come over here, and you can loosen it up at either end. I'll just do it here just because it's so much easier. Wiggle that up and out of the way. I really love these creepers, man. You can get up on top of these trucks and do all your work laying nice and comfortable up there. You're not having to put your feet on the bumper and booger it up and all that. And these things are just handy. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested, but you know, I'm not sponsored by these guys. I'm just showing you guys ways to keep the joy in wrenching. All right, so now let's see if we can't get this snorkel off of here. We've got a couple of little grommets in the back. Oh, well, let's remove this hose real quick. And this hose is attached with a little squeeze clamp. So just push it and pull. So let me show you. See that? When you push it, they widen out, those little fingers widen out and allow you to pull it off of there. And then this just sits down on some grommets. I think there's another one over here somewhere. There we go. Okay. Things have been on there a while. Now, you can wiggle and pull towards you, and it'll come off of, you can see this will come off of your throttle body there, opening up the area quite a bit. All right, now we can see things a little better, and we're going to have to remove our intake here to get down to our oil cooler below it. And as you can see, we've got a number of hoses and things in the way, some electrical wiring, and I'm already noticing, hopefully you guys can see this right here, a bunch of leaves and sticks and grass. So again, more evidence of footprints of the rodents and even some perhaps bedding material there. So I'm kind of expecting to see that, you know, they were in there doing some damage. I don't know, but we will find out, and I'll take you down there to find out along with me. But in order to get this thing off of here, we're going to go ahead and remove all of these different attachment points. And it looks like there's a little bracket here that holds it to the front, and then a number of bolts that hold it down, and then we'll be able to lift it up and bring it out. All right, let's go ahead and start working on the attachments to the intake here that we can reach. So we'll start here with the sensor. You just want to push back these red tabs. Pull those off of there. Okay, we've got a Christmas tree clip right here. We can work our way out and get underneath there with the trim tool. Give it a little bit of a side-to-side wiggle. There we go. Come on, work your way down. All right, that's off of there. And then that comes and attaches to this bracket here, but we can leave it there. We've got this connection here to the throttle body. Again, a little clip that we can unplug. Got a protective gray lock on it. See if I can get that, back that gray locking tab out a little bit. Boy, that's on there. There we go. Now we can squeeze and pull. Unplug that. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and take these two nuts off of this bracket that holds the front portion of the intake. They're 10 millimeter. Just get in there. Lift that loose. Hopefully we won't drop it. Come on. There we go. There's one. And I'll get a tray for that here in a second. Let's get this other one. Go. There's two. All right, so the next thing we need to do is take this bracket that's attached to the side of the intake manifold loose so that the bracket can swing away off of these studs that had these 10 millimeter nuts that we've now placed in our handy little tray here. So in order to loosen this bracket, there's two bolts that hold it on, and you can see right down here, hopefully, where my finger is, and you can snake a 10 millimeter through there and get on that bolt to remove it, like so. And hopefully you won't drop it like I did. And there's another 10 millimeter bolt holding that same bracket, and it's right under here where my finger is, back behind. And again, you can sort of snake through there and get the wiring loom out of the way just enough to put your socket on that 10 millimeter with an extension. And you'll see it when you get in here. A little difficult of an angle for me to show. But once you get those loosened up, you'll see that this bracket now will get enough play in it to move out of your way. Okay, now that we've got the two bolts loose off of this bracket, it will just pull to the side and off of those studs. So now that we can get that out of the way, I'll just go ahead and sort of push it underneath and out of the way of those studs so that once we remove the bolts that are holding that intake manifold on, we can lift it up. Okay, so the only thing that looks like it remains attached to our intake manifold on this side is going to be this one air line here. So we'll just go ahead and wiggle and pull that off of there. And I think that's everything on this side, the driver's side of the intake manifold that's holding it in place. So we'll go ahead and go on the passenger side and see what we need to remove there. Okay, so on this side, looks like we've got a number of lines here. So there's an evap line for the purge valve. We'll go ahead and pull that off and take it out of its perches here and sort of set it to the side as best we can anyway. We just need to get enough room in here to where this intake manifold can lift off. Okay, we got this other air line attached here. Let's see, may have to give it a little persuasion if some of these are stuck on there, like in this case. Just kind of wiggle it a little bit, or you might have to get underneath the edge of it to break the seal some. You can do that with one of these picks like I'm showing you here. Once you got that seal broken, a lot of times it'll snap right off real easy. There we go. Okay, there's that, and this can just be pushed aside, it looks like. And we've got a number of these wiring looms and things still attached as well. And we can disconnect this wiring loom if we need to, but it's attached to some kind of a bracket on the bottom of it. And I think I'd like to detach it from that bracket and just sort of push it aside if I can. So let me look under here and see how that's attached. Now that we have these air lines out of our way, we're going to go ahead and attach this bracket that holds the main harness here. Looks like it's attached to our intake just by a couple of 10mm bolts. So go ahead and take those out. And that should allow that bracket to come free. And it does. And the bracket is out of the way, but there's still a Christmas tree back here. Hopefully you guys can see that. Christmas tree. Little plug right here. So we'll get in there with our trim tool and loosen that up, wiggle it, hopefully free it from there. All right, now we have no more hindrance to removing our upper intake manifold. All right, now that we've got all of our hoses and wires and everything disconnected, and we can tuck those kind of out of the way. Be careful not to break these. They can be a little bit brittle, but you can bend them out of the way. Before we take this intake manifold off, because we're seeing so much debris and dirt and leaves and trash, and we expect maybe there's even more to be found once we remove that. We don't want that to fall down inside the engine or anything else. So I'm going to blow off, and I would suggest that you blow off the engine with some compressed air to get some of that stuff out of the way. So that's what I'm going to do now. Just don't want any leaves or anything falling inside the engine. All right, so now let's go ahead and start removing the bolts that hold down the upper intake to the lower intake manifold. And they're these 8mm headed bolts. You can start in the middle, start at the end. You don't have to worry as much about warping this thing. Just going to crack them loose, the ones that I can see and get to very easily here. Okay. Let's see. Does that get the thing freed up? Something I'm not able to touch yet, no doubt. We're getting there. Oh yeah. Yep, so now we can see it's moving just a little bit. All right, go ahead and remove those bolts. Well, we just thought that we had all of our attachments on this side done, but we forgot a couple. You see these two 10mm nuts right back here next to our brake booster? Those have to come off, and there's a bracket that those are attached to that's holding on to our intake. Now, the bottom of that same bracket is held on to the exhaust manifold area by 13mm nuts. So you may need to loosen up those 13mm nuts at the bottom, but what I'm going to try and do is just take these 10mm nuts off the top, and since I have everything else undone, lift this thing up and slide it over a little bit and see if I can get away with leaving the bracket, the lower mounting points in place. And that way I'll have a bit of an orienting sort of bracket there to put it back in place when I'm done. So let's take these two 10mm nuts off and see if we can lift this thing up and out of the way. Let's get these out of the way. Just break them loose, and then we'll probably be able to turn these by hand once they're broke loose. this really long extended handle 10 millimeter swiveling ratchet wrench is a lifesaver. All right, let me see if I can reach back here. Yeah, get that by hand. I can. So there's one. Don't want to drop it, so I'm holding on to it and taking my time. Let's put it over here in the tray. And let's get this other one. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now, if there's just enough play, maybe I can lift this thing up, over, and out. Let's see. Okay, let's see. So up, over, and out. Come on, baby. Hey, looky there. Nice. And we didn't even have to remove that stupid bracket there. Let me show you. So, I just took these two nuts off, loosened up all of these 8 millimeter bolts that are holding it down to the lower intake manifold. Now, I did have to loosen this particular bracket, and I went ahead and pulled it out of the way. Now, I wonder if there's a way that you could have just lifted it all up and over at one time and not needed to remove this front bracket. Probably, but hey, you live and you learn, right? Let's see. So, yeah, looks good. I'll set this here to the side, and now see what we have to work with. All right, so as you can see, we have clear opening to the engine intake runners, and so we're going to want to put some rags in this, keep any of this dirt, debris, trash, whatever from falling down inside of our engine. So let's get something inside of each of these runners. Make sure that nothing can fall down inside our engine before we go to moving anything else. And this is just some blue rags torn in half. Just anything to keep stuff out of your engine. So now we can move things around and not worry so much about them falling down into our engine. Okay, good. So next, in order to get down to our oil cooler, we're going to have to remove this lower intake manifold. So sure enough, just like we were seeing out here with all our rodent footprints, you can see that the rodents have been in here chewing on a few things. This little piece of protective foam here. Oh yeah, look, there's a little pile of rodent foam and poo or whatever back in here. So we're getting down to the nitty gritty now. This is where you want to start looking and seeing if you see any evidence of chewing on any of the wiring harnesses or any of the evap lines. You want to try to nip that in the bud, put something, inside your engine bay that's going to scare off the rats. You could leave the hood open even, they just don't like going in if the hood's open. So that's something as simple as that can cure that issue. Okay, so now that we've got our upper intake out of the way, we can see the lower intake that needs to be removed to get, again, down to the bottom of our oil cooler here. And so we'll just go ahead and start by unplugging all of the electrical connections, these to the coils, and then we'll do these to the fuel injectors here, which have the red locking tabs, which have to pop up first before they can be undone. And you may need a pick to release that red locking tab. Just put that pick underneath it, lift it up like so, and then that'll allow you to squeeze it to release it. So again, the red locking tab slides up, and then you just squeeze this black piece right there, and it will release the grip it has there. And then these attachment points here need to be pried out of place, and so you get your handy dandy trim tool again and try to wiggle it up underneath there. Just like so. These things get a little bit of brittle over time, and you'll see little pieces of it will fall apart, and just kind of wiggle it back and forth. It'll come out. But again, you can see all these pieces of plastic and all of these things that are just flying around. You don't want those falling down in here, so keep this stuff protected. I'll go ahead and move on back and finish this side and then tuck this wiring just sort of out of the way, and then we can move on to the other side. All right, so we got all of our fuel injectors and coils unplugged, and you can just take that wiring harness, lift it up, kind of tuck it back here just a little bit out of the way. And now we can come over to this other side here. Sorry about that. Come over here to this other side, kind of move some of this stuff out of the way. You can get down to your fuel injectors and again the coil packs, which on this side still has a little locking clip, a little red locking clip. So anytime you see these red or gray locking clips, you'll need to pry those out just a little bit like that in order to get a good squeeze on it so that it will release. A lot of times these things will break off and not be there when you get a chance to come into the car and start working on it. But these are here. All right, and let's go ahead and do the same thing for our fuel injectors down here. Just pop those tabs up, get a little pick underneath it, pry upwards until that tab releases, like that, just like so. Okay, you don't want to pry too hard, it might pop off there. Once that's out of the way, you can squeeze it with your fingers or some pliers or something like that, whatever you need to get down in there. Get a squeeze on it. Let me try my other hand, and there we go. And then pull those up and out of the way. All right, and again, we're going to release our wiring harnesses. Little Christmas tree clips. Get underneath it, give it a wiggle, pull until it comes loose. If they break, it's okay. Not a big deal. Just try not to break them all. And again, these little brittle plastic pieces break and little pieces of plastic fly everywhere. That's why you cover these holes up, so that it doesn't go flying down inside your engine. All right. And then we got one more right back here. And if you know, when you put the wiring harness back in place, it'll make sense which one of the things plugs in where. But if you're afraid that you might get it mixed up, you can put a little piece of tape on these and label them. You know, this one goes to that coil, or this goes to that coil, or whatever. But in this case, it lays out pretty easily and nicely, so we don't have to have that. Now, because this thing is this wiring harness is sort of in our way, we're going to go ahead and unplug this thing. And so in order to do that, you see on the side there's a little gray tab that you can push in and squeeze and kind of wiggle and pull apart, and it'll unlatch on the back half. And you can then take them separately and just kind of lay them aside, again, out of the way. If you need to, you can put a little bungee cord on it just to hold it back out of the way. But in this case, they're laying out there just fine. The same thing with these evap hoses. We can lift those up and just kind of bungee them out of the way, or you can pull them to the side like so. And I think that's what I'll do, just because it gives so much more room. So let me get a bungee for that. Okay, got my little bungee here. I'll just grab it, take it, and pull it aside. That kind of keeps everything, you know, sort of tucked up out of the way. That way you can really see where you need to be. And again, we got a lot of debris in here, maybe some mouse activity. You might want to blow this off one more time just to get all that junk out of the way. You can see that big pile of mouse bedding and poop back here. So we'll go ahead and blow all that out of the way before we get any further. All right, hold your breath, guys. All right, so we've got lots of space, lots of room now. The next thing we want to attack is this lower intake manifold is still attached to both the valley and also this fuel line. So we're going to go ahead and take that fuel line off. And in order to get this released, you can take your fingers and just get underneath the edges of this blue clip. You want to be careful that you don't lose it. You can pop it up real easily and lose it. So I'm just going to set it over here where it won't get lost. And then you can squeeze the bottom of this connector. And as you do so, the little fingers will spread out again. Now, when we pull this away, it's going to try and gasoline may spray out of here. So just be sure that you get something to absorb the gasoline, and watch your eyes. Don't have any sparks or anything like that around that might cause a problem. I've got some pig mat here, and we'll go ahead and squeeze this thing and see if it will pull off. I'm squeezing from the bottom, and you can see those white fingers are starting to spread out as I do so. You might wiggle it just a little bit. It can be a little bit difficult to push, get all that spread out enough, but there she comes. All right, and there it goes. So it's leaked just a little bit of gasoline, but not too bad. We'll go ahead and leave this here to absorb any more of the gas that comes out of that. The car has been off for a little while, so the pressure that may have been in those fuel rails has dissipated quite a bit. But yeah. Now that our fuel rail is disconnected and safely tucked out of the way here, we'll go ahead and remove the pig mat. And we need to remove these 8mm bolts that hold the lower intake manifold down. So just go around the perimeter and loosen and remove all of these 8mm bolts that are holding it down. Now these bolts are captured, they call it, so it won't come out very easily, and that's fine. So you can just lift it up until it sort of stays that way. That way it'll be out of the way when you lift the thing up. All right, just wanted to point out where the bolts are that are holding this lower intake manifold down. You have 4 on each side, 1, 2, 3, and there's one back here behind the rail. 1, 2, 3, 4 on that side. So let me get that last one back there. Okay, make sure that they're all completely loose. And you can lift them up, and you'll see they kind of stay up like that whenever they're loose. All right, now get this out of our way and try to keep the light on it for you guys. But now that that's loose, we should be able to just lift it up and pull it out. Oh, look, you see? It's attached to this wiring harness back there. There's a little plastic clip holding it in place. So we need to get back there and free that wiring harness up. So just push it. Let me set you down for a second, and I'll detach that thing. I need both hands. All right, so now that we've got the wiring harness disconnected from the back of the lower intake, we can go ahead and lift it up and pull it forward. All right, here we go. Now, before you do anything else, you want to transfer your protection from the upper to the lower intake here, just so that we can make sure that nothing falls down into our engine while we're working in here. Okay, there we go. First, safety first, they say, right? And here we go. So you do not need to remove these bolts that hold your fuel injectors down. You don't have to worry about the O-rings or anything like that. This is the easy way. We try to do everything the easy and fun and most joyful way here on my channel, the joy of wrenching. There we go. We'll set that aside. Make sure that all the O-rings were still, all the sealing O-rings that seal it up against the cylinder head there are part of it. Now we can see our oil cooler. Let me get you in here a little bit closer. Now we can see our oil cooler here. Let me get you in here a little bit closer. And back on the back side of the oil cooler, that's where our oil temperature and pressure sensors are. And what we're looking for is any evidence of chewing or anything like that. And I think I see a little bit right here on these wires. Hopefully this is coming through. It's not too close, not too far away. There might just be, yeah, just a little. See how that's nicked right there? I'll bet you that's our problem. Little boogers, little mousy was up in here taking a nap one day, and he looked over and he said, I wonder what that tastes like. And he probably took a little nibble on that wire. Oh yeah, look at that. You can see how these wires are kind of coming apart and touching that aluminum sheathing. And I'll bet you that's our problem right there. And I'm going to look down at that other one and those other wires down below and see if they also have any issues. But this is probably going to be our fix. All right, let's unplug this thing. So it's got one of these red tabs. Anytime you see a red tab, it probably means it needs to be lifted up. And then you can squeeze on the back side of it. Wiggle and squeeze, maybe. Sometimes these things are a little hard to get off. There we go. All right, that takes care of that. And sure enough, it looks like there's some nicks in that. Oh, look at that. See that wire just broke? There was our problem. Some little booger, little mouse got in here and nibbled that sucker so far through that it just had maybe a couple of connections, a couple of wires connecting it, and it just broke. So we're going to have to fix this connection here. And I'll bet you that's going to be a job done there. So let's see if we got any other nibbles down here. Sorry, I can't get down there and keep out of your way so that you can see as well. But let's see if there's any nibbles on these wires. Doesn't appear to be, and we weren't having any codes, so I think this one is going to be our problem. And this is your oil temperature sensor right here that has wiring that has been chewed by some mouse. And we saw the evidence, all those mouse footprints and all of the chewing of the foam and everything like that. And sure enough, our idea, our plausible explanation is turning out to be the truth. So once you're this far in, you might look and see if your oil cooler appears to be cracked or leaking, or if that valley is full of oil. I don't see this one having that big of a problem yet. Some of the oil that you see down there is probably from just changing the oil filter, which lives inside of here. But if you see that valley is full of oil, it might be worth changing this oil cooler. This is a known problem area on these vehicles, but this one looks like it's okay. All right, so I've gone ahead and stripped back enough of this aluminum sheathing there to expose the wires, and it looks like the purple one also has a little bit of a nick in it from the mouse. So we're going to go ahead and splice these two together again and fix this, and then seal it up with some heat shrink, and we'll have us a fix here and button everything back up together. All right, so there we go with our fix. We got it wrapped up in heat shielding, heat shrunk, got some liquid electric tape in there, no more leaks, and I dare that rat to chew on it again. And so now we're about ready to put our lower and upper intakes back in place, but beforehand we're going to clean all this gunk off of here, make sure that that's a nice clean surface for everything to mate up to. If you don't clean these off and you get a little bit of an air leak through here, it'll make the car not run correctly. It'll mess with the fuel air mixture. So I want to make sure that we get that good and clean before we put everything back together. Now we got her all buttoned back up together, just the way that we took it apart, made sure that everything's plugged in, and let's go and see if we fixed our issue. Okay, let's climb in the truck here and start it up. Okay, no weird lights on the dash. And we're looking at the data stream for engine coolant temperature and engine oil temperature. And we got engine coolant about 100 degrees, engine oil about 77 degrees. Let's see here if we rev it up a little bit. Nice and steady. So, okay, engine coolant starting to come up a little bit. 77 degrees. Let's see that engine oil temperature come up as well. That way we know that things are starting to warm up inside of there and that it's reading correctly. I don't want to see that flatlining. Now when it's wrong, it flatlines at -40. Come on. Warm up. 80 degrees, okay, good. Keep on increasing. Still no weird lights on the dash there, that's always a good sign. See the coolant temperature starting to creep up there, getting warm so that the heater will work. 82 now, so yep, going on up. I must say that this thing is fixed. Well, there you go. So if you've got that engine oil temperature sensor code going on with your 3.6 Pentastar, I showed you where it lives and I showed you what might be happening, especially if it's a circuit code, which is a wiring issue. And in this case, some mouse had gotten in there and decided to nibble on it. And so that's why it wasn't working. We fixed that. And now this thing is ready to rock again for a long, long time. I sure appreciate you guys tuning in today. Y'all have a wonderful day and God bless.